Good evening. Welcome to the Pullman City Council meeting for this Tuesday, July 19th. It's nice to have you here. And Dee, would you please call roll?
Mayor Johnson.
Present.
Councilmember Benjamin.
Present.
Councilmember Dubin.
Here.
Councilmember Guido. Here. Councilmember McCall.
Here.
Councilmember Parks.
Here.
Councilmember Weller.
Present.
Councilmember Wright.
Here.
Under announcements tonight, the city will be mailing a flyer to all water customers asking to please make small, smart changes to your irrigation plan for the rest of the watering season. You can visit Pullman Conserves page on the city website and learn more. The retirement celebration for Police Chief Gary Jenkins will be held on Wednesday, July 27th at the SEL Event Center anytime between 3 and 6. Chief Jenkins has spent nearly 50 years in law enforcement, 12 with the Pullman PD. 30-year Pullman PD veteran Jake Upkennorth, who's sitting in the back of the room, will succeed Gary as chief. Also, there's another, if you want to pre-funk that, as they would say, next Tuesday, the day before, on July 26th, the public is invited to thank the owners of Dismore's, Archie and Shelley McGregor, for all their hard work. They are closing the store down actually on this Friday, and they have done a great community service at Dismore's, so there's going to be a chamber get-together. Everybody's invited at the Oak on Main from 6 to 8 o'clock to thank Archie and Shelley McGregor for all their hard work. The Working Washington Grant Round 5 program has $70 million available for small businesses that experienced hardship during COVID-19 pandemic. You can apply from August 17th to the 31st at commercegrants.com. If you want some more information, you want to have some help, just contact our City Economic Development Office. Here's some updates from the Parks Department. The Rainy Park splash pad is closed for repairs, unlikely to reopen this season. The problem is a motor failed. And you've been reading about supply issues, and that factors in because they're expecting to get the motor sometime between 6 and 8 weeks. So that's what's happening as far as the splash pad is concerned. Mary's Park finished installing 9,300 square feet of SpectraTurf rubber playground surfacing. The new park is expected to open in a couple of weeks. Concerts in the park continues tomorrow with the Cherry Sister Revival at 6 o'clock at Rainy Park. Movies in the park continues on Friday the 22nd with Luca. Starts at dusk at Rainy Park, free popcorn and snow cones. And with the temperature in the 80s, you better get quick to the snow cones. And Lennell Fest Co-ed softball tournament happening August 20th. You can register by August 12th at the Pullman Parks and Recreation website. The price is $200 per team. M&O maintenance crews have continued street painting after delay because of the white paint problem and some issues with the white paint. College Hill is the target location this week. Pullman's wastewater treatment plant became one of just 124 facilities across Washington state to win the 2021 Outstanding Performance Awards for meeting the full compliance for their water quality permits. As you recall, we honored them last year for getting that award, and that's 124. There's 281 cities and towns in the state, so that's rather important, and it's a lot of congratulations go to the great M&O crew. We're very proud of them. With that, we now go to presentations. And with the lead-in for that, Mike Urban, our city administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. With us tonight is Matthew Reback from Spin Mobility to catch us up on their discussions with Washington State University about bringing their product onto campus. Staff wanted to make sure that Council had a presentation on this because there's a lot of overlap with what cities got going. We have some concerns that we can discuss at the end of Matthew's presentation that about where things are left in geofencing and a lot of how the maps that have been proposed include city streets already, not just WSU campus. So with that, I give you Mr. Reback.
Thank you very much, Mike. Will I be able to share my screen? Is that enabled? I'll just go for it.
Baker, if you can get him set up for that.
Sorry to start with some technical difficulties, everyone. So it seems like it's loud on my computer. Oh, Yeah, I think I'm already sharing.
It's not there, we just see you. So
Sorry, just a minute.
we'll give it another minute, otherwise we can just continue to
Oh,
move on.
just 1 minute.
And council does have a copy of the presentation in their packet.
Great. Well, let's just go ahead with that because it's making me quit Ring and then reopen it. Apologies, I'm more familiar using Zoom on my day-to-day, so learning in real time here. But I just wanted to start by saying thank you all for the opportunity to present to you and speak with you a little bit. I'm sorry, I'm kind of seeing double of myself here, so it's a little disorienting, but I'll just look at my other screen and thanks for bearing with me. Basically, I was first contacted by some students at Washington State University in December 2020. They were seeking a replacement for the Coug bike system that was on campus at the time. Spin is a carbon neutral micromobility company. We operate in over 80 cities in the US and across 30 campuses. I specifically focus on campus partnerships, and oftentimes that includes cities as well, such as Pullman and Washington State. And so really, I've just been in conversation with many stakeholders at the university over the past year and a half about this program and about coming up with a good substitution to Coug bikes to give students the opportunity to travel around campus and also access all the great things that Pullman has to offer, and similarly to give residents a chance to navigate the city. But I just want to make one thing very clear at the beginning of the presentation. Spin is a partnership first company. So in our 6 years of operating, we've never launched without permission, explicit written permission from both municipalities and campuses. So, I just want to assuage any fears on the front end that, there's not just going to be scooters showing up in Pullman without specific consent. We do have the capability to just only have scooters and bikes on the Washington State University campus. So I just want to make it clear that, it's not our intention to launch without express permission, and really partnership is a big part of it in communication. So without further ado, I'll just go into it because I know there's probably a lot of questions about this. So this has been my program for Washington University. So just a quick table of contents. I'm going to try to keep it really high level. I'll just tell you a little bit about Spin, our history of compliance, how we approach safety and campus planning, and thirdly, just liability, because I know that is always incredibly important. So Spin and Tier. So Tier is our parent company. They're a Berlin-based micromobility company. Generally, Spin was founded in 2016 with the mission of giving people a freedom to move. Because of our partnership approach, we were acquired and operated under Ford as a subsidiary from 2018 to 2022. And then in January of this past year, we became part of the Tier Mobility family, and they acquired us because they wanted to enter North America and work on transportation solutions here. And they saw our track record as being the one with the most reliability and trust through our campus and city partnerships. Tier is incredibly well-funded. They're the most well-funded micromobility company globally. And that gives us a lot of financial solvency as we establish new partnerships. And then just to give you a sense of the scale of this operation, on campuses with an average size of over 20,000 enrollment, our average fleet size is around 330. And for Wazoo, the agreement as it stands has a max deployment of 300 bikes or 300 scooters and 100 e-bikes. That being said, I just want to make it clear that whenever we initially launch, our initial launch is often a quarter of that. We start very small and we very gradually ramp up. This is all written into the contract in terms of how we scale operations. Our goal is not to just inundate a place with bikes and scooters. That's not good transportation. That's not good for places. It's not good for riders. Our goal is really to find the right number where they're accessible and benefit people's daily lives, but they don't create, a headache for people that are walking along the sidewalk or drivers or anything of that nature. So a big part of SPIN is our workforce model. One of the reasons we're able to commit to all the things that we say we commit to is because we only employ W-2 employees, which means that anyone who handles a SPIN scooter has been trained and gone through our we go through OSHA certification. We have a clear chain of command within our operations folks. So it's just very clear who's responsible for what, and it ensures that when things such as maintenance or picking up a scooter from a problematic location, when things of that nature are concerned, we know exactly who's supposed to be doing what, and we also are able to commit to things such as like a 2-hour response time for any request to move a scooter wherever it's parked. If there's a request to relocate it, we have to move it within 2 hours. So that's really our workforce model, and it's not the most technologically advanced thing, or it's not super glamorous, but it definitely is the biggest difference between us and some of the other companies that provide similar services as us. And just sort of as an extension of that, I wanted to quickly just give you this slide about our history of compliance. This is from a 2020 to 2021 pilot in the city of Chicago. And you can see, the notices to correct, so the warnings for the different companies, and then the notices of violation or the citations. And as a consequence of this track record, the city of Chicago recently revamped their program, and they're doing a 2022 to 2024. And SPIN was selected as one of the 3 vendors to participate in the program again because of our compliance. And again, it's not the most exciting thing, but that's what we do well. So, that being said, I want to kind of move into just talking through our campus and safety planning approach. And I know, this is more Wazoo centric because that's who I've been speaking with up to this point, but I really am excited to get more collaboration from the city of Pullman on this front. So for campus planning, it's a 4-part process. We've developed this over working with over 24 campus partners over the past few years. The first thing is stakeholder engagement, just having a lot of conversations, getting a lot of feedback. The second is conducting a campus transportation analysis, where we look at existing assets and what we could leverage to create the safest possible program. The third is an operations design. So that is basically what our program looks like in practice from like a geofencing standpoint and a required parking standpoint. And finally, the fourth is program customizations. So that looks like our safety ambassador program or different marketing and messaging that we do throughout the program and on an as needed basis. So stakeholder engagement, I mean, this is, I kind of talked through them all pretty quickly, but it's just different folks that we talk to. At Wazoo, we've spoken with student government. This is a UREC program, so it's really going through them, but as part of that, we've worked with transportation, facilities. I've spoken extensively with the risk management advisory group. I visited campus December 2021 and met with quite a few folks then as well. I did an on-campus demo and presentation. So, it's really just been great to meet more people in the community, to see the place firsthand. It wasn't a very long trip, but it was nice to have a real sense of what the program might look like. So that's stakeholder engagement. Operations design is the next component. So this is sort of just an example, but we're able to differentiate what sort of e-bike and e-scooter activities can take place in certain areas based on what we come up with from the transportation analysis. Operations design, again, is sort of an extension of that, which is basically what we do in practice with the analysis. And then finally, we have, program customization. So we have safety ambassadors who are hired students. They're not maintenance professionals. They're more peer-to-peer educators that, conduct in-person education, and they help us, integrate into existing events so we can be more clear about, appropriate ways of using the service. Another thing I wanted to note on this front is we can make the first ride anyone ever takes on a scooter, for their account, we can make it an automatic slow ride. So that makes a big difference in terms of curbing accidents with scooters. We find that a third of accidents happen on the first ride. And so if the first ride, we can allow people to get a good feel for, the scooter before it goes to its full speed, it makes a big difference in terms of like learning just something as simple as using the handbrake. For whatever reason, in a lot of my demos, when I visit places, people forget the handbrake is there. And when you have that first ride way slower, we can make it like 8 miles per hour as opposed to 12 or 14, which is what it typically is. You have that slow ride, it really gives you a lot of confidence when you're using the scooter. Geofencing, this is probably the most important feature that we have because it ensures that scooters or bikes won't function. They won't be able to be rented or ridden in areas where we don't permit them to be. And that's because of a small sensor in each bike and scooter that, has what we can identify its location based on our geofence. And if, a bike or scooter goes into a no ride zone, you'll get auditory alerts. So it'll beep at you. You'll get visual alerts. It'll actually flash. And then the brake will engage and the throttle will cut out, not like in a very sudden way, but in a gradual way. So you slow to a stop and then you won't be able to accelerate or pedal the bike. And you'll check your phone and it'll say you've entered a no ride zone, please return it. And you won't be able to end your ride until you return to a zone where you're allowed to park the scooter. So geofencing is the most important thing because it really gives us agency over where these can wind up. Of course, there can be instances of someone who wants to pick up a bike. Well, the bikes are pretty heavy. The bikes are about 80 pounds, but wants to pick up a scooter. Maybe two people want to pick up a bike and do something funny and, throw it somewhere. Like this has certainly happened in the history of spin, but we've found that this was more something that occurred in the first year or two of micromobility when it wasn't really, there wasn't education about it. It was when programs sort of just showed up and there wasn't a whole lot of consultation. So just geofencing makes a massive difference. As part of geofencing, we also complement it with, in-person visual indicators. One that we've been especially using on campuses and in cities is on the far right, which is there's this 3M tape that like lays flat on pavement or brick or, it just lays flat and it provides an indicator for where is an appropriate place to conclude a ride. We also have these customized decals, and then there's these scooter parking racks that we've used as well. But with geofencing, we are basically able to create parking zones, two distinct type of parking zones. So one parking zone rewards users when they park there, meaning say you park in the right zone within the program boundary, you get a financial credit to your next spin ride. So those are called preferred parking zones. We can also do required parking zones. So we can create zones and you cannot end your ride unless they're at required parking zones. So that really is an internal conversation that needs to happen. And we often In our experience, what we've done typically with other cities and campuses is start with preferred, and then if there's the demand for it, we go to required. But typically referred is good. But it's definitely a conversation that has to be had at some point. In addition to geofencing, we also have a lot of in-app safety messaging and router education. We have a required quiz. So anytime you first ride spin, you have to go through a five question safety quiz. And we also can periodically launch these throughout the duration of the program, around certain events on campus or in town if there's a demand for them. So there's a lot of different tools we have in the app to appropriately educate individuals. And this is just really scratching the surface. We can send emails, we can push notify users, we can have it so when a user goes in a specific zone, a specific pop-up comes up and notifies them of certain cautions. So there's a lot of communication we can do just within your phone. This was just a map, a preliminary map for Washington State University. I do acknowledge that there are some zones here that would be considered Pullman. And so, like I said earlier, this is not the final version. This is an iterative process. And, even with Washington State, we're still working out certain deployment zones and things of that nature. So, I don't want you to think this is the map that is established and finished. Even when we're working in a program and we've had a partner for a year, we'll look at certain things and look at certain riding habits and trends, and we'll come up with better options. So, this is sort of what we initially pulled out. I was reading through, Pullman's code as well, and noticed there's certain areas where motorized foot scooters aren't allowed to be ridden in the central business district, for instance. And so, if those are the wishes of the city of Pullman, of course, Spin will comply. That is what we do, is we follow the rules that our city partners set for us, and that's why cities allow us to come back and keep providing our service. So, this is sort of just a preliminary link. And then deployments and parking, apologies for all the text on this slide. I think you all, it's really just an explanation of the last slide. And, this was talking about, starting with a small deployment. So finally coming into liability, every user agrees to our terms of use when they sign up for an app and before they can go for a ride. And at Spin is, as part of our liability coverage, we're able to cover the university and the city as additional insured parties as part of our agreement. So that is sort of the very high level of Spin and Wazoo. And would love to open it up for questions to anyone that has one, or even comments or feedback, or would love to just, open it up. Thank you so much.
Okay, Matthew, here's our first question from Nathan Weller.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I do have some questions regarding, we've had some challenges, of course, getting students downtown. So I appreciate you bringing up the motorized scooter ordinance. Now, there's some questions about, are these usually in the law, and maybe Laura can help with this, can they be ridden on the road or just on the pedestrian way?
Actually, under Pullman's current code, they are prohibited from being used on any of the city's trail systems and paths, and then also prohibited from use on any street with a speed limit of 25 miles per hour or greater. My understanding is that's all of the streets.
Okay. Things seem to move a lot quicker than sometimes government is able to react to. I know this is very popular. My question is, if at some time in the future this is allowed on streets and so on, we have bikes that are left downtown. Would you be picking that up? And another question is, people who drink and ride, I'm sure you've run into this. Do they have access limited? Is this something that, how do you deal with that? That's another question.
Totally. So I guess there's really, the first question I'll answer is, would we pick up other bikes that were left, in the park system? We would not do that. We would only handle spin e-bikes and e-scooters. We wouldn't presume to know what to do with, other bikes that are left. We wouldn't want to overstep any boundary there. And then the second question in terms of, drunk scootering or drunk biking, is there's actually two things we could do. The first is we can institute a curfew on the service. So we can, some places will do 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. The scooters and bikes are all unrentable. So that's definitely an option. Another thing that we've done, it's quite popular, is we have a safety test, which basically, if you're delayed in your reaction time on this unicorn's horn lighting up, I know it sounds a little wonky, but if you're delayed in your reaction time, then you are instructed that you are deemed to be over the legal limit, and you should not be allowed to rent a scooter. And so your account is, you can't use a scooter for like the rest of the evening.
Okay. Eileen?
I definitely think that scooters are here to stay. And I also have talked to our previous chief, Ted Weatherly, who was instrumental in putting our local ordinance together. He was very man of vision in that regard. Texans have a tendency to be that way, or at least they used to be. We would have to really retweak our code a great deal to allow this to happen. And I know that code revisions are time-consuming for staff, and we're in the process of getting a new city attorney on board. That could take a while. So I'm a little concerned about, like I say, I think scooters are here to stay, but we have to do this right, and I want to do it right the first time. I mean, and if the bike breaks down or the scooter breaks down and everything, what's to prevent somebody from chucking it in the creek? And then who gets to fish it out after that? That's a dangerous recovery operation. Does your liability cover that? But anyway, looping back to the city ordinance type of thing, realistically to our staff here, what would be a timeline? I see a lot of things that would have to change in our city code.
My response would be, as soon as we had clear direction from the council as to what specifically they would want to change in the ordinance, end of September, beginning of October, be awfully optimistic, especially since we're going through budget process at the same time. And being able to bring that back on a council agenda item, I think by end of the year is a little more realistic.
Thank you, and I'm just curious as to, I mean, we have a helmet law. This is Washington State. We have a helmet law. Our code says operations during daylight hours only. That would be a big shift in policy from what you had just stated, young man. And so I don't know whether that fits in with what you envision for having your service provide, with what we feel is safe for our community. There's just a lot of ground to cover here, and I'm worried about the timeline.
But for WSU streets, that's under their jurisdiction, it would work.
Yes, on the limited number of streets on campus that are not public streets, not city streets, they could be operated. And on WSU campus paths, campus sidewalks, those are really intermingled in terms of what's a public street and what's a WSU street, though. And So for example, Stadium Way, a portion of it is WSU, and a large part of it is city.
Okay. Well, we've enjoyed your presentation, and obviously we have some work to do. Is there any other questions at this time? One other thing, just on the scooters, obviously you have a preferred place where they park. I assume that's where the chargers are. And how long do you get on a scooter or a bike in terms of distance? And the bikes, we see the electric bikes all over town. So what would make that not available to the students up here to ride on our streets?
The electric bikes are available.
Okay.
The city code only prohibits
The scooters.
a foot scooter, and that's defined as a device that's, I just read it, designed to be stood or, well, yeah, maybe actually not. I was thinking it just said designed to be stood upon, but it does say designed to be stood or sat upon. But the wheel size is limited to 10 inch in the definition. So if the bikes have wheels greater than 10 inches, they would be
They're good to go.
allowed.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah, were there any other questions? Did you want me to answer that question, Mayor, the one you just asked? About the charging stations?
Please do.
Yeah, so we don't actually install any infrastructure to charge in the public right of way. We don't do any digging or anything of that nature. We have a warehouse that we rent out, and then all of our operations and charging happens from that specific warehouse. So there's no, nothing like that. And in terms of the range, it's about 45 miles per charge on the scooters and bikes. But the scooters and bikes become unrentable when they're under 30%. So you're not running the risk of having your, e-scooter, e-bike die on you, so to speak.
Okay.
And I also just want to say, I'm reading through the code where I have it up right here. And, when I think of what this is describing, what the code is describing, it's referencing towing, and it references mufflers and kill switches. The scooter described here doesn't strike me as the same. And I understand e-scooter, and I understand, this is the code that the city has to follow. But our scooters are capped at 12 to 14 miles per hour. We can cap it at 12 miles per hour, and we can make slow zones 8 miles per hour, which is like a quick jog. So I just want to sort of, introduce that idea that, these scooters are not really going incredibly quick. They're not going to be used to tow things or anything of that nature. But, I don't want to overstep any boundaries and talk about the standard of the code, but it's just something that occurred to me.
Okay. Megan?
Sorry, just one question, and this is for Laura. Do we allow e-bikes on sidewalks and streets?
E-bikes are on streets.
E-bikes would fall under the same definition of bikes, so there are requirements for yielding to pedestrians if you are on a sidewalk. The central business district, any type of two-wheeled vehicle is prohibited on the sidewalks. So
Okay.
skateboards, bikes, I think it even includes roller skates.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sidewalks, not the streets.
Yes,
Okay.
Correct.
the city sidewalks in the central business district.
Again, thank you very much. We now move on to our next report tonight, and this is the Police Department Annual Report. And we have Gary Jenkins coming on board, and there he is. Okay, Gary.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I apologize that I can't attend in person tonight, but thank you for allowing me to present virtually. And you should have a hard copy of the annual report in front of you, and I'm going to
We
share
do.
my screen. And there we go. It should look like that. So I'm not going to go over everything that's in the report, but I do want to point out a few highlights. So let's go ahead and start on page 4. Here at the top chart or the table, we have comparison with statewide crime stats, comparing 2020 to 2021. And you'll see that we have two areas where we had increases: crimes against person offenses and also our crime rate. And really, that's a matter of having low numbers last year, primarily because of COVID. So our numbers are still fairly low, even though they show increases. And then our overall crime rate, our overall total crimes, you can see, are down 5.5%. You can see in the bar chart there that crime is generally trending down. The large spike there in 2011 was due to 750 credit card fraud cases, and compare that to 83 fraud cases in 2021. Now we'll go to page 5. This table is kind of busy, but it gives you an idea of all of the crimes that we report to the state, who in turn reports those to the FBI for our crime stats. And this is last 11 years. The crimes that really drive our crime numbers are assaults, larceny or theft, and vandalism. And you can see that those numbers are usually the three highest crime numbers that we have. And so those are the types of crimes that really drive our crime rate. And again, even though we show an increase there at the very last row on crime rate, we show a slight increase. The number's still very low historically. Now we'll go to page 6.
And Gary, we had a question before you started about crimes against society. That includes drug, narcotic offenses, gambling, pornography, prostitution, weapon law violations, and that's what's included in that part.
Right, yeah, there it shows them all right there. Crimes against society. And this again is a pretty busy table, and it shows just numbers for a lot of work that our staff does for the past 6 years. Our total calls for service were up about 7%, but 2020 was a pretty low year, primarily also because of COVID. We'll go to page 7. So we just started reporting on our response times. We're getting what I have some confidence in their numbers. The increase that we saw in 2019 to response time, I think was primarily due to some staffing issues we were having at the time. And so that increases our response times. And then impacts from COVID really affected our response times in 2020 and some in 2021. And then also recent legislation that requires officers to spend more time at scenes and have more officers at a scene also impacts our response times. So we have seen an increase. And it looks like we kind of have a general trend of increasing there. And really staffing is what really impacts those numbers, as well as how much time we're spending on calls. We're working with our research partners at WSU to look at the time we spent on certain calls. We have a sense that we are spending more time on mental health calls on each call than we used to. And so we think that is also driving this response time number up. But we'll be able to report more on that research in the future. We'll go to page 9. I just want to point out the work we've been doing in mental health and wellness for our staff at the police department. We did receive a grant to develop a regional peer support team for law enforcement agencies in Pullman, Moscow, and also WSU Police Department. And then we also deployed the Cortico mental health and wellness app that's available for our staff and their families. We'll go to page 10. There at the bottom, I mentioned the administrative sergeant position that council recently approved. Went into effect this last January. This has already taken a lot of the workload off of both myself and Commander Opkin North. Sergeant Greg Umbright is the first sergeant in that position, and he's working on agreements and logistics for our CAP projects, including the radio study and police facility needs assessment. And he's also taken the lead on a number of community events, including National Night Out that's coming up. Next, we'll go to page 11. Here I provide a summary of the police reform legislation. Go to page 15. I'll note toward the bottom, I mentioned Narcan. I just wanted to remind council we're continuing to save lives with Narcan. We first deployed Narcan in 2017, and every year our staff have a number of saves with the use of Narcan. Now we'll go to page 17. Down towards the bottom, the table, our social media. Our social media footprint continues to grow, and I just want to acknowledge Darby Baldwin for the fantastic job she has done with social media. She has a great balance of information, humor, and seriousness, and does a great job monitoring and making sure that we're out in front of information that or misinformation that might be out there. Next, we'll go to page 18. Again, at the top of the page is outreach. Sergeant Umbright has been working on a number of projects, so I think you're going to be seeing an increase in some outreach events by the police department, and that's primarily because we have someone that can work on taking the lead on those projects. And then the research consortium is just such a great resource for us, and I appreciate council's support on that. I think it's just something that's a model for the rest of the nation. And then we'll go to page 19. Pardon me. The bottom table there, you can see that there's some numbers that just don't seem to make sense with the residential rental unit and commercial business registrations. There's some drastic changes between some years there. We're still trying to sort that out. When we started using our rental registration software, and I believe that was in 2019, we saw some differences there, and we're trying to determine really how to best count these numbers. The loss of our police technology specialist didn't help that, so we hope when we get that position replaced, they can give us some help in this area. Excuse me. And now to page 21. And then just another note about the Citizen Academy. We had one at the end of 2021, and of course we did another class in 2022, but we've received some really good feedback on the Citizen Academy. And that concludes what I would like to point out. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Becky?
Actually, I just have a comment. I want to thank you for the data-based approach to policing that you use and the transparency. I was just talking to a constituent who had been upset about the red camera lights, thought that we might be implementing that without looking at it, and that person got a chance to watch your and Megan's presentation last week at council meeting, and just was so impressed at the even-handed approach. And I see that through all the work you're doing, and just want to say thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Megan?
So Chief Jenkins, I also want to compliment all the work that your team does. I do want to, just looking forward with the change in leadership going forward, if there are plans to continue to look at the mental health focus, and particularly in light of the recent shootings and lack of communication and communication breakdown that we're hearing about nationally. What kind of plans does the department have to continue to look at that and to ensure that communication is in place and we don't see something like that happen?
Yeah, I've been working with, since I've been there, I've been working with Commander Oppennorth and in his capacity as commander the past, I think, 3 or 4 years now. I think Commander Oppennorth, I have every confidence that he's going to continue the communication and transparency with the community and continue to reassure the community that we have things under control and that our staff is well trained, and admit if there's areas that we need some work on as well. So I'm very confident that the future of Pullman PD will continue very much in the same way.
One thought I had was, putting together some kind of group that works with the school district around plans, preventive measures, communication, ensuring that safety measures are in place on the school side as well.
Yeah, so in particular to the school district, we recently, our command staff met with leaders from the school district to discuss emergency plans and in particular potential events of shooting or an active shooter. We do this every year with them. We did this just recently after the recent event in Texas. And so we talked about our protocols, we talked about the school district protocols, and we're gonna be working some more with them to provide training to their staff. And we offer training however they would like it throughout the school district. Of course, it's up to them what they want to utilize, but we are in regular communication with them and go over our plans frequently.
Thank you.
All right, and if there's no other questions or comment, Francis? Okay.
So thank you, Chief. I appreciate this report. I'm always interested in your insight as we look forward. What are the things that as a council we need to be aware of that could be emerging issues elsewhere that could be potentially coming to Pullman or things in Pullman that we need to be aware of as a council in order to take action now or to be planning on in order to head off areas? Are there any issues like that that you see emerging?
Well, thanks for that question. I think definitely we have seen more incidents involving firearms. Of course, we had a homicide last year involving a firearm. We've had a few shooting events. So I think we can expect to see, unfortunately, some more of that. But also, just as the city grows, we've been very fortunate in Pullman to have a relatively low crime rate here, and we don't have very many violent crimes. But we can see, we don't have to go too far to see in other jurisdictions that are larger that do experience those types of crimes much more frequently. So I think we just need to make sure that we maintain enough of a police department presence to try to maintain Pullman the way that it is now for as long as we can. And of course, that means making sure that we provide the police department with the resources to be able to do that in line with how much the community grows. So that would be what I would want to watch for.
Okay, Nathan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, I'm always very impressed, and unfortunately you're leaving, but with your innovative leadership and proactive approach towards community outreach. I think it's really important to mention that homelessness has been at the top of your mind and some of your officers. I'd like to, it'd be remiss for me not to recognize Officer Patterday, who's put together some resources and, from what I understand, done some outreach with our homeless population. And as far as mental health, the mental health first aid that your officers go through is top-notch and is one of the reasons that I've really said all of us should go through something similar. So just want to recognize that and all you've done for the Poverty Awareness Task Force and Community Relief Fund. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Ann?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief, for this, as always, very thorough report. My question has to do with the Group A offenses. The highest number are assault and intimidation, forcible sex offenses, and violation of no contact or protection orders. Does the department have, is the department or will the department make this a priority as far as outreach into the community? What can the department do, or what is the department doing? And I know you do a lot. I'm not being critical at all, but those numbers concern me a little bit, and I am familiar with that area somewhat. So I'm just wondering if there's going to be more of a focus on that within the department and how to deal with that.
Well, some of those that you mentioned are not necessarily always connected with each other, such as the no contact and protection orders. A lot of times, of course, those are involved in domestic situations. And of course, as you know, we work very closely with ATVP. And the assaults that we have, I think those are primarily, or the majority of those have some type of a element of alcohol or drugs involved in that. I think we can have an impact there with our engagement up on College Hill with our College Hill officer. And so those are the ways I think that we've traditionally been looking at those, but and in fact, our assault numbers actually, if you look at historically, are down. Of course, they're up from last year, but last year again was a low year. But our numbers are somewhat down in that area. And the no contact protection orders, I believe those weren't being reported as a Group A crime before. That's why it went from 0 to all of a sudden having numbers there. So
Yeah.
that's something we'll definitely want to keep an eye on. And we do, domestic violence is one area that we take very, very seriously. And our officers spend a lot of time with those investigations. We have a screening tool that we use that's been evidence-based tested to help identify those victims who are at greatest risk that we can get immediately into a shelter. So, so we definitely do take those seriously.
Thank you. And the community, we do appreciate your work on that. I just wanted to ask that question. Thank you.
Pat?
Gary, I just want to say that it was a great day when you and Melinda decided to come here to Pullman. We are so thankful for everything that you have done for the community, your involvement, and just your overall approach to law enforcement and all of the innovative approaches that you've taken for Pullman. You are one of the reasons that we are one of the safest cities in Washington. And I personally am sad to see you go, but I'm also looking forward to working with Jake. So good luck and Godspeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
And again, as a promo, we'll talk about next Wednesday, the 27th, between 3 and 6 at SEL Event Center. You can come and thank Gary personally for his great work that he's done for the last 12 years here. So again, thank you, Gary. I think we're going to hear from you a little bit later, too, as well. So now we have the Public Works Annual Report with Sean Coates, our Public Works Director.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about this tonight. I think we can take a lot of pride in our Public Works Department and show a lot of progress here. And just to do a quick recap of Public Works Services, we're housed in several divisions, and the first one is the Engineering Services Division, which includes engineering and the stormwater groups. Our Maintenance and Operations, or M&O division, houses our street maintenance, water system maintenance, sewage collection and wastewater treatment system maintenance, city fleet maintenance, stormwater maintenance, and then lastly, we've got our Public Transit division as well. So I won't go through every detail of the annual report, but I'll hit on a lot of the highlights. So I'll start with some of our streets projects. And of course, in 2021, we had a major street resurfacing project on Spring, Crestview, and Harvest on Pioneer Hill from Main Street to Bishop Boulevard, and that includes traffic calming measures. Another big element of our streets program is our downtown master plan, of course, which council adopted in late 2021. Right at the tail end of that adoption, we immediately moved into a data collection phase, which we completed also right at the tail end of 2021, which allowed us to move into our concept refinement stage, or our phase 1 work that we're currently doing. More of our streets projects, of course, we've got 2 roundabouts under construction, but of course, there's always the design work that leads into that effort. And so we completed that design work in 2021 on North Terraview Drive and Northeast Northwood Drive. And that, just to highlight some of the funding there, we also were recipients of a TIB grant that funded a lot of that construction effort. Second roundabout is under construction. That is a developer-led project at Albion Road and State Route 27. And then upcoming major street maintenance project is in progress, and actually two of those. One of those is the Terraview resurfacing project, which we completed in record time. We actually knocked that out in about 3 weeks, so we were very pleased with that. And then the second major street maintenance project that we have going this summer is, of course, our Center Street reconstruction work, and that just got kicked off this week. So in 2021, we put quite a bit of effort into local road safety plan. It's titled 2022, but we actually kicked that work off in 2021. And with the intent of being ready for applying for this WSDOT safety grant that is for 2022. Now, we made a request for $1.6 million. We haven't heard about that grant yet, but we're optimistic. We just missed the cut the last time on this grant application. If we're successful in this, that work would fund the priority safety projects that are identified in the safety plan, and that's primarily traffic signal enhancements and pedestrian crossing improvements. We successfully submitted and obtained a Complete Streets grant to improve the city's active transportation system. That was a grant application that was put together with our engineering division. And that will fund a new shared use path that's been a long time in the works. There's a missing gap on Terraview between Merman and North Fairway, where we need to complete a section of shared use path. And then another project that this money will fund will be right across the street from City Hall on Crestview, where we will connect the shared use path just completed by the school district and then tie that down to grant. A few other highlights, moving on to water and wastewater projects. The water tank 12 design was completed in 2021. We've got a bid time frame of this upcoming winter. We decided not to bid that one this past winter, largely because of the steel prices. So we're hoping that we can see those prices dip down a little bit before we bid that. But this will significantly advance our water pressure and fire protection in the northeast zone of the city. We also designed a replacement for the solids processing equipment at the wastewater treatment plant. That design was completed in 2021, and we're currently under construction on that project. And we nearly completed in 2021 a citywide water system master plan, which really defines all the capital investments that we need to make sure that we're keeping our water system in tip-top shape. To talk about a few of the airport highlights, we closed out a project in 2021 to extend gravity sanitary sewer to the new terminal. We also completed a concept design of Airport Road, which we used to then turn around and apply for a build grant. And the build grants are particularly competitive, so you need a lot of information to feed into those grants. So we used that concept design to feed into that. We've submitted that grant application, so we're crossing our fingers that we get it. That would fund design work for airport road improvements. And then lastly, the City Engineering Division is currently working on a design for extending a water main to the airport in the 2023 construction timeframe. Focusing on a few of the maintenance and operation work highlights, our street maintenance crews spent almost 7,500 hours maintaining 98 miles of streets and 21 traffic signals. That same crew, or the operations crew, I should say, spent almost 13,000 hours on the water system to pump almost 1 billion gallons of water in 2021. Our sewer maintenance crews spent almost 5,000 hours maintaining 96 miles of sanitary sewer main. Our wastewater treatment plant treated 760 million gallons of wastewater to Washington Department of Ecology Standards, which, of course, we just got the award for. So we're excited about that. And that comes out roughly to an average of about 2.1 million gallons of water treated per day. Stormwater system maintenance totaled about 2,000 hours, and that's elements like street sweeping and storm drain maintenance. Some of the upcoming highlights in the maintenance and operations area, again, water tank 12 construction and the solids processing equipment at the wastewater treatment plant, which we talked about earlier. But also, a big project that's been in the works for a while, advanced metering infrastructure. We're kicking that off this year with a multi-year time frame to get that implemented, depending on how the funding works out. Of course, you'll see we'll see on your consent agenda grant submittal for that. The maintenance and operations expansion grading project is underway. And then immediately on the heels of that will be a new decant facility on that area. Last but not least, transit highlights. Our fixed route ridership totaled just over 500,000 bus riders. And compared to the pre-pandemic level of about 1.4 million, we've got a ways to go yet. So we still don't have all those riders coming back to the system yet. And it's very similar with the dial-a-ride ridership. In 2021, we had just over 12,000 riders compared to a pre-pandemic level of almost 25,000. So luckily, we had a lot of grant support to help us bridge that gap during the pandemic. And so it's made up for some of those operating costs that we would otherwise have had more support for. And I'll finish with touching on a few sustainability highlights in Public Works. First, of course, we had our first 2 electric buses arrive in 2021. Those were 80% grant funded, and we have a 3rd electric bus also arriving in this summer. So we're probably about a month out before we get that 3rd electric bus. We upgraded the transit bus facility to, of course, support those electric buses, including electrical upgrades. The recreational building solar array has saved 267,000 pounds of CO2, equivalent to about 2,000 trees. The wastewater treatment plant, the UV disinfection project that was completed roughly 2 years ago, I understand now. It's working well. It's worked to minimize chemicals and associated hazards with disinfection before we discharge our treated water to the South Fork of the Palouse River. And then touching lastly on water, our per capita water demand continues to drop, supported by water conservation efforts. We've, of course, got more work to do, but we're seeing progress. And then lastly, we're working with the Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee on sustainable long-term water supply planning efforts so that we can take that next step in our water supply. And with that, I'll take questions.
Questions or comments? Okay, Megan?
Mine is more a comment and then a suggestion. Just thank you for the report, and it's always just enlightening to me what it takes to run a city and to have all those parts running smoothly. I wish citizens would take more interest and, tune into what it does take and the effort that's made, things that we take for granted. And then my suggestion is around communication. I have lots of ideas for Matt, our new communications coordinator, and he's been great. But just putting out more of those kind of did you know facts, I think would be really helpful for people to tune in to just short little nuggets of information and highlights.
Okay, Francis.
Thank you. My question had to do with our bus ridership. And once again, I'm thinking forward as we're planning going into fall. We had a 5% increase from last year, but last year was significantly down from our previous high. How are we positioned for being able, if we have this sudden increase back 50% or greater, moving toward where we were at, how are we for staffing and buses ready for handling if it goes that direction?
Yeah, so I think our partnership with WSU is specifically important in that case because a lot of that ridership is driven by the WSU students. There was certainly a hesitancy to come back under the pandemic conditions and ride the buses. I think we'll start to see that come back fairly quickly going forward. WSU did cut back their funding just a little bit, and you'll see that as part of our upcoming presentations. And so we've had to cut back service just a little bit to match that, but I think continuing to have that conversation with WSU and saying, you know, as that ridership comes back, you know, please, please, please work with us to make sure that that funding is still there. And their funding is largely tied to their student enrollment. And they've seen slight drops in their student enrollment. So as we come back from the pandemic, I suspect they'll see that come back, and then they'll have more funds to put into the transit system. So that relationship is particularly important.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for that report, and stay tuned because you now have the next report on street maintenance and revenues services and our sources that we can have for street maintenance.
Okay, to give a quick overview of this presentation, I want to talk about a summary of road maintenance status, the status of the street fund, the revenues and the costs in the program, inflationary impacts, and funding options. And then lastly, finish the discussion requesting some guidance from council. So starting with summary of the road maintenance status, we literally have mapped the surface of all of our streets, literally every square inch of the surface. And so we took that data and plugged that into what we call our road matrix program. And that's a program that essentially tells us how to optimize the use of our street maintenance dollars. And that's largely based on generating this what's called the pavement quality index, or the PQI. And the PQI basically is a function of, you know, how much how comfortable our ride is when we drive our pavements, as well as how much surface distress is in those pavements, how much cracking, how many potholes, that kind of a thing. So that PQI number is very important to us. And if you look at that in real world terms, 90 to 100 PQI basically means you've got a perfect road surface. So you can see that here in that upper left corner. Roughly 60 to 70, you still have a fairly good quality road, but you're starting to see some deterioration. When you get down to the 40 to 50 range, you've got a fairly heavily deteriorated street, and then when you get to the 10 to 20 range, your street has essentially gone to failure. It's almost turned into gravel at that point. So if we look at our 2019 data set, which produces this data, our PQI is overall at about 41 network-wide. And if you look at our arterial and collector streets, that's where we've spent more of our maintenance dollars. That's where you've got more traffic volume, the higher speeds. The arterial and collector streets are a little bit better condition than our local streets. And the local streets are basically, you know, when you're getting down to the neighborhoods, very low volume streets. And unfortunately, that 41 PQI number is fairly low. It's the streets, some of the streets are in bad shape. And, you know, again, you know, putting that into real world terms, you can see the picture of what that would correlate to here. So talking about what the road inventory looks like, you know, again, we're breaking our roads into these arterial streets, collector streets, and local street classifications. Arterial streets encompass about 11 miles, or about 15% of the road network. Collector streets are about 17.8 miles, or 23% of the network. But a big chunk of our streets is really our local streets. Total centerline miles is about 77. So as you drill in again to this depiction of the quality of our street network, you know, it really comes down to that you'll see a lot of our local streets are in poor condition. So about 26% of our streets are really falling into that failure mode category. Roughly 38% of our streets are at that poor category. So the rest of them are above the fair or good area. And one point I want to make when we look at doing maintenance on our streets, it's highly beneficial to do the preventative maintenance work up front. It's a lot cheaper to do that than it is to completely rebuild a street. So if you think about doing a chip seal application on top of a street, you can extend the life of your street many times over compared to doing a complete rebuild. So you compare that to a complete rebuild, and that's going to be on the order of 15 times the cost to as many as 100 times the cost, depending on the specific scenario. In that middle range, the rehabilitation treatment, where it's about 3 times the cost of a preventative maintenance treatment, that's what we just did on Terraview. So we grinded up the top, 2-inch surface of Terraview, and then placed new asphalt on top of that. So that category, we're still, we prefer not to let it get that far along, down the road, but we can live with that. So from a street maintenance strategy standpoint, essentially, to minimize the life cycle costs, we really want to prioritize the preventative maintenance work on our streets. And then to do that, what we've done is, again, built this tool, this data-driven tool to say, how do we use our funds in the best and most efficient way possible? And then lastly, we take those streets that have come to that field condition. It takes a lot of money to get those built up and reconstructed, but once we get them reconstructed, we want to make sure that we're maintaining those going forward, and we're doing those preventative maintenance treatments. So when we ran the budget analysis, and these are based on 2019 costs, essentially at our current level of investment, what we see is that our streets would basically be in the same condition going forward as what they are now. What this chart is essentially saying that, in the last 5 years roughly, we've invested about $933,000 a year in street maintenance projects. And just to be clear, this is not fixing potholes, this is not snow and ice control, this is specifically hiring a contractor to go out and rebuild a road surface or apply a chip seal, something like that. So if we continue to invest at that level, basically we'll maintain the same level of PQI that we have now. If we invest another $600,000 per year on top of that, we can increase our PQI about 13 points over 10 years. If we invest about $1.2 million extra per year beyond what we are now, we can increase our PQI by 24 points over 10 years. And to boil that all down, if we were to go out today and do all of our streets all at one time, bringing them all up to that 90 to 100 PQI level, we would have about a $32 million investment. Again, that's 2019 dollars. I'm not bringing this forward yet. So let's talk a little bit about status of the street fund and the revenues and costs as well as the inflationary impacts. And if you look at this table, and specifically if you look at the revenues, looking from 2017 to 2021, what you'll see is the revenues have essentially stayed flat. And so, as our costs have gone up from an inflationary standpoint, the revenue sources just haven't kept pace. And I asked the engineering division to look at our specific costs on asphalt material costs, specifically for our city streets projects. And since 2017, they've calculated a 37% increase. So it's basically we're taking all of that money that we have been investing in capital projects, and we're shifting more and more of that to our operations side of the house. And if you look at where the street fund revenues come from, it's mostly from utility taxes. So again, if you look at the numbers here, the utility taxes have stayed flat since 2017. The real estate excise tax has gone up a little bit in 2021, so that's been a nice bump in the fund. Before that year, it didn't really go up, but I'm hoping that trend continues a little bit. The fuel tax, again, you'll see that fuel taxes remain flat since 2017. And then we've got kind of the challenge there with fuel tax that as we get more electric cars on the road, you'll see less of that fuel tax coming in. And then miscellaneous funds, most of our grant funds don't really get pushed through the streets fund, they get pushed through the arterial streets fund. And there's a reason for that. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But we do get small grant projects that we are able to push into this fund. So from here, we want to talk about funding options. I'll pass the baton to City Administrator Urban to talk about funding options.
Thanks, Sean. Good evening again, Council. So since the streets presentation is talking about funding for it as well, I shoehorned in part of the discussion tonight to discuss the council goal to research and discuss implementation of a transportation benefit district. So I want to start with that piece tonight, and I'm going to go through it a little quickly just because we did the original presentation on this in September of last year. I did send City Council an update with the legislative changes in April of this year, including a link to the previous presentation for the new council members that didn't get to see it live the first time. So again, what you see on this slide is just an overview of the 111 transportation benefit districts that live throughout the state of Washington. And you can see there's a large smattering certainly in Puget Sound, but they are all over the state. Next slide, please. So funding sources for the transportation benefit district there's a couple different options. There's vehicle license fees, $20 fee without voter approval. You can go up to a $40 fee with some voter approval. And then there's a $50 piece on that. One of my assignments on the vehicle fee was to figure out how much that would be for the city of Pullman if we were to do a license tab piece without the voter approval. We reached out to the Department of Licensing, and they were unable to give us the data we needed to give you a firm answer. So you'll see on a couple slides in the future here, it's a wide range. We tried to get all the vehicles, just a total count of the vehicles registered to the 91163 zip code, and I keep getting a item every 30 days saying we need another 30 days. So we're still waiting from the Department of Licensing. And I have been in touch with them personally to try to speed things up, but that's where we live right now with the license fees. Next slide is the sales tax piece. When I originally presented this item, we were limited to 0.2% on a sales tax, but in the last legislative session, it was increased to up to 0.3 with that first, or even last for that matter, I guess 0.1 can be assessed by the board without voter approval, but the other 0.2 would have to. So that's the big change that happened in the legislature this year, is they changed it from 0.2 to 0.3 and then made board approval on 0.1 of that. Next slide. Other funding sources, certainly for transportation benefit districts, a general obligation bond, still to this day, Auburn's the only one that has tried that. Border area fuel tax, that's Point Roberts and Blaine, due to their proximity of the Canadian border, so it doesn't affect our border with Idaho. Impact fees is another option for that. I'm going to touch on a little bit more in the couple slides down here as well. Vehicle tolls is another option that we can collect, but if it's on a state route like Grand Main or Paradise, it would need the state approval. There's a authorized voter one-year excess property tax. If voters wanted to approve that, they can do a one-time piece to help fund this as well. And then a local improvement district is another option, kind of a sub-area of the larger area if they're doing a bunch of work. LIDs are very complicated, but they're out there, they're useful. Not a lot of people are doing LIDs nowadays in cities due to latecomer fees and all these other pieces. So it's just not used very often. So when we look at the potential income for the city of Pullman, again, 111 transportation benefit districts in the state. 7 of them are formed but not funded, so they've gone through the process and just haven't started collecting fees. Last time I presented on this, 5 cities had license fees and voted tax. And in just the few months since then, 4 new cities have joined that rank: Ridgefield, Shoreline, Snoqualmie, Soap Lake. All the cities that have, none of the cities have taken advantage of the 0.3% yet because it's such a new option. So of the cities that have done the sales tax funding, 48 are still at the 0.2%. And then the license fee estimate, I worked with GIS to come up with a jumping off number for tonight's discussion. We feel it could generate anywhere from $40,000 to $200,000 if council were to do the full $50 fee based on what we think the registered vehicles are in town. Next slide. So going through the sales tax collection method, and I kept it at the 0.2 since that's kind of the apples to apples piece. If you want to do 0.1, you can cut that in half. If you want to put 0.3, we can add half back to it. But you can see when I came in September, 2021 wasn't finished yet. Since it has finished, we've projected that we would have collected $809,000 if we had the 0.2 towards the street fund on this. So other funding sources that I didn't talk about the previous time with the Transportation Benefit District, but that exist in the revenue guide for the state of Washington. For streets directly, the first 3 bullet points, commercial parking tax based on parking businesses, basically commercial parking lots where you pay. We don't have any in town, but that is another option. There's a second part of the real estate excise tax, REIT 2 is what it's commonly called, but to have access to that, the city has to plan under the Growth Management Act. So that's a hard line in the sand. Impact fees, we were planning under the Growth Management Act. There's a version for that we can implement, but there's also a version called a Local Transportation Act fee that if we're not planning under growth management, we can assess for increased demands created by the development. So that would be general to that development and some of the inflows. If the thought is there's a development on the south end of town and we want to turn some of that money toward the north end of town, we would have to be able to draw a very clear line that how that development increased the demand further upstream. The last item is another funding source, which I would caution the council of looking at, and that's reallocating general fund to the street fund. What that would do is we'd have to be looking at other operations, police, fire, library, finance, planning, parks, everything else that whatever funds that are already funding the general fund that we turn around to reallocate out, that means those other departments are making cuts in services and programs. So those are the different options for street specific and other as far as putting things towards where we are on our current streets, local, arterial, and major collectors.
So with that, we wanted to ask council, kind of that fundamental question: do we continue that level of investment that we have now? Do we try to increase that and increase the amount of street maintenance work we do? And so I put that question to you, and I'm available for questions.
Okay, Pat?
Thank you, Sean. Having just recently traveled on the newly rehabilitated Terraview Drive, excellent.
Thank you.
Felt like you were riding on a carpet, and then I was on my way to another location and went on to another portion of Terraview that hasn't had that same rehab, and it was quite a difference. So anyone that questions the value of the rehab program just needs to make that little tour. So that was great. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great example.
I don't know that we can afford not to do this. I think given the statistics that you provided as far as the PQI information, let's start to be proactive on that and not wait until we're in that very poor quality. I know it's going to be a project, and it always has been. As soon as you finish one end of it, you got to go back and start at the beginning again. But I think we have to start somewhere, and we need to just continue to do what you have been directing to do. So, thank you.
Nathan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councilmember Wright. Many people have spoken about our need to improve the streets. You know, I've discussed at length about the importance of a data-driven look at how to improve the streets so we're not just going hill by hill by hill. It doesn't work. And I think also with our growing city, there's going to continue to be issues. As far as how to fund it, that's, I think, the larger question. And Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were not really in favor of the vehicle. That was something that wouldn't give enough bang for the buck. Is that correct? The vehicle licensing?
I would want to go back and double check my words, but I think the intent behind it was at the amount of 40,000 to 200,000, we're not going to get very far.
Yeah. I hesitate to say, I don't think I'm going to have an answer. It's often better to have an answer if you're going against something. But in my opinion, on sales tax, we're already, it's challenging already with sales tax. We're on that border. And I don't know that people would want to pass anything to continue taxing themselves. So I don't have an answer, only challenges. So I'm just going to leave it at that.
Megan?
So it's clear to me that we need to fix our streets, and it's clear to me that we need additional revenue to do it. And the Transportation Benefit District seems like the right approach. And no one likes to tax themselves, but everybody wants nice roads. So I think we have to seriously look at that and look at an increase in sales tax. And I realize that we're on the border, but, you know, comparative to other cities in Washington, we're below average, so I believe. So I think we have to look at this seriously.
Francis?
Thank you. As I was listening to your report, I was hearing shades of former Councilmember Barney Waldrop talking about investment in streets and not waiting. This is something that, with the data that you've shown, it definitely shows that we need to do something different. Otherwise, we're going to continue with the same results. Additional information that'd be helpful for me is going to be what is average streets in the state of Washington. So we have our number, but how does that compare to other municipalities as we're out here? I'm thinking in the context of how do we present this to the community. If we're looking at increasing funds, there definitely has to be a messaging part of it. Part of it is that, part of it's going to be from the community side, and I've definitely heard from community members related to our streets. And I think the next step that we would need to do in this process is figuring out what is that funding level that we would like to work to try to achieve. In other words, you gave us a number of different lines, and what's that number and the new slope that we're going to try to achieve. And that would then dictate and give us guidance on what type of funds that we need to look at. It'd be helpful to know all the fund options. I'm sorry, Mike, that you're having the trouble of getting the information related to the license side, and that's something that we need to know in order to continue this discussion. But I would definitely support us moving forward, identifying what's the new slope that we want to achieve, and then it's going to be how do we set our priorities in order to make this happen. As I was thinking about some of the different funding sources, even when we talked the licensing piece, and I was thinking about all the students that use our roads but license their cars elsewhere. And so I was thinking through the users and how do we make sure that the users that are benefiting from the roads are actually part of helping to pay for this. And it's not just burdened onto a certain population group within our community supporting everyone else in this.
Okay, Eileen.
I've spent a lot of time on this over the last few days. We're $1 million short in the street fund, aren't we? I mean, that's kind of it, the long and the short of it.
Yep.
So we need to find a way to generate $1 million. And a combination of sales tax and licensing might get us to $1 million. The administrative overburden of the licensing fee concerns me. But that's kind of a side issue. At the present time, Pullman, and indeed all of Whitman County, is among the lowest sales tax in the state. I mean, the lowest in the state. There are a few exceptions. So should we put this in front of the voters? I think we can inform the voters and establish a comfort level for them as to where we are and where we need to be balanced out against the conditions of our streets. The border consideration is an interesting one and a challenging one. I reached out to Jen Hackman to see if she had any good information for us on that, and the answer, Jen, was?
I'm sure that there's an inflection point at which it would impact elasticity of demand, but it's an economist that you would probably reach out to with a particular specialization on tax policy and fiscal impact.
So flying by the seat of my pants here, I sort of did my own research. Clarkston, obviously their sales tax is higher than Lewiston. I think one of the ones that really jumped out at me was Walla Walla, and it appears on the map with the little red dot. And 8 miles from Walla Walla is Milton Freewater, Oregon, who has no sales tax, 0. Walla Walla is 0.089. And so that may be an indication. I know people that live in Walla Walla, and the only reason they drive to Milton Freewater is to buy cigarettes, because that's a different tax thing altogether. So, but I mean, I looked at pages and pages of this, and we should have some elbow room in here to place this in front of the voters and ask them how they want to go on this. There's a lot of border communities that, and this is not just a big city tax either, which really kind of surprised me. I mean, we've got Rockford at 0.081, Colville at 0.78, Titan at 0.8, Union Gap at 0.82. So there's a lot of smaller communities with fewer resources than we have that have had to reach out to this to maintain their streets and their municipal facilities. It's a tough choice, but let's put this in front of the voters and give them as much information as they can handle, and have them make that choice.
Becky.
I just want to thank you for this presentation tonight. Once again, it's just so clear. In the very short time I've been on council, I've reached out to your department, as you know, a number of times for information or to talk, and every time I walk away just blown away by not only your preparedness, but the level of detail. I think it's very clear that we need to improve our streets. It seems to me, to kind of summarize some of what's already been said, that this is a little bit of a PR issue too. I agree with Councilmember Benjamin that getting that information, getting that comparison would be very, very helpful. And then to echo back something Councilmember Guido said earlier is a little bit more like the police department and how the way they kind of just push forward that information. You are so good, your whole department. But that's not what I'm seeing reflected in the community. They're not appreciating the work that you've done. I'm just going to say one word real quick, roundabout, and let that go, because you have done the work. It is so clear, and they're not getting a chance to appreciate that. So I agree we need to have the streets improved. I agree with the transportation benefit district, possible raise in sales tax, all of that. And then a quick reminder, I mean, even a little on Facebook, you know, did you know that I even forget, I tried to write it down, that you've had someone drive every street in Pullman, that you know exactly what we've got, or why you're prioritizing maintenance over redoing the streets, those little bits. And all of that just to say, because there's so much there to brag on, so much there. Thank you.
How true. And I know that TIB has some records as what other cities are gone through in terms of their grading, but it's not the same system that you've had driving through like this. But they do have some kind of grading, because I know the engineers give us those reports during our board meetings. This city is going for this, and that they're currently in an F category. They have some of those numbers that we might be able to use, just knowing it's a different database. But I think TIB would have some of those figures, and especially now that we have a TIB engineer over here on the east side out of Spokane. So I think we might be able to use that source too, just to try and help get that comparison. But any other comments? Okay, Ann?
I think I'm the last one, so I won't repeat. I agree with everything really that's been said. And I want to emphasize kind of what Becky said too, is educating the community, because we've already heard after the presentation of how the roads were graded, and you know, then I drove home and I went up my street and went, oh yeah, that's not good at all. You know, I mean, we sort of get used to it too. So the education piece is important. I mean, I think we've all been to, and some of us are from areas where the roads are really bad. I mean, yeah, Genesee County, Michigan, there's patchwork that's been there since 1972. I'm just saying, they just keep patching it. And so I do feel like we're fortunate, but I also think that, you know, we do need to do something. And I do think the sales tax thing is viable. And I do think the vehicle registration, even though we have a lot of users who don't register their vehicles here, but at least it would be, you know, it's kind of like a use fee, you know, you're using the road, so you have to kind of pay toward the maintenance of it too. And I don't know what the answer is to capture the commercial semis that come through here, not even our farm guys, but just like the commercial, you know, trucks that come through. That would be, if we could capture some funding there somehow. I don't know what that would look like, but anyway, thank you so much for this. It's really helpful.
Yeah, Mike?
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to touch on an item that Councilmember Benjamin brought up, is trying to get a assessment of what the rest of the state of Washington looks like, and I just don't want to get council's hopes up a little bit. What we went through here for a process of assessing our streets is a very expensive process, and it's a snapshot in time. And I was going back through the city council where I used to sit on the west side, where we did this similar event in 2012 to see if they had an updated version. And I'm not seeing anything, I'm not saying it's not there, but you know, that 2012 data would be not very useful to us now. So going back how far and what the data set is going to look like going through TIB, I'm really concerned that we're not going to have a whole lot to compare to.
And I would add to that and just say that, you know, the goal would be to get to a point where we're mostly doing preventative maintenance on our streets rather than rebuilding streets. And so if you set your level of investment to target that, that's the ideal. You know, it could, because at that point you're spending a lot less money on your streets. So that's essentially minimizing the life cycle cost.
I mean, we're going to do the work, but I just wanted to, manage the expectations.
So we're going to stay tuned basically to hear some recommendations as far as the council says. I've heard that we should be raising funds because otherwise we're losing. And so through a TIB, through a little bit of license, but definitely on sales tax.
Well, it sounds to me like some of the things that are being considered would be items that would be required to form a transportation benefit district.
Right.
So is it the council's instruction to have us bring back at least forming a transportation benefit district so we can start funding it?
Yes.
Okay, that's clear. Okay, we'll work on that.
Okay. Sean, thank you very much. Next comes public comment for any item that's going to be final on the agenda tonight. And again, just to remind you that we are having 2 public hearings dealing with our transit. So if there's anybody who would like to make a public comment on any final action tonight, and seeing none, we're going to move on to the consent agenda. These items are considered routine in nature. The council's had a chance to look these over ahead of time. Do I hear a motion to do the consent agenda by title only?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, Laura McAloon.
Thank you, Mayor. Your consent agenda consists of a motion to dispense with the reading of the minutes of the regular meeting of July 12, 2022, and approve them as submitted. A motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks numbered 107208 through 107225, electronic transfers 69, 70, 879, and 885 through 890, payroll direct deposits numbered 78006 through 78353, totaling $1,430,544.55. A motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks numbered 107226 through 107339, totaling $1,941,521.81. A motion to authorize the execution of a 2022 WSU Football Emergency Medical Services Agreement. A motion to adopt the final strategic tourism plan. Ordinance number 22-17, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Pullman, Whitman County, Washington, relating to Title 12, Traffic, amending Chapter 12.10 of the Pullman City Code and Pullman City Ordinance numbers 12-16, Section 1, 04-34, Section 1, 2004, 04-12, Section 1, 2004, 009, Section 1, 2000, 99-36, Section 1, 1999, 94-11, Section 1, 1994, 92-21, Section 19-1, 1992, 81-4, Section 1, 1981, 80-64, Section 1, 1980, and other matters properly related thereto. Ordinance number 22-19, an ordinance of the City of Pullman, Washington, granting an extension of a non-exclusive telecommunications franchise with Zayo Group LLC, amending ordinance numbers 12-2, 2012, and 13-20, 2013, and other matters properly relating thereto. Resolution number R-41-22, a resolution of the City of Pullman, Washington, authorizing the execution and submission of a Water Smart Water and Energy Efficiency Grant for fiscal year 2023 application and providing for other matters properly related thereto. And resolution number R-42-22, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Pullman, Whitman County, Washington, repealing resolution numbers R-3-19, 2019, R-47-19, 2019, and R-29-00, 2000, establishing monetary penalties for parking infractions and other matters properly related thereto.
Is there any item the council would like to offer discussion?
Yes, number 5.
Number 5. Any others? Then the consent agenda consists of items 1 through 4 and 6 through 9. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Second.
Moving second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item number 5, Pat.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So since I was not able to be present at the meeting where the final plan, the final strategic tourism plan was presented to council, I was hoping to take the opportunity today to thank the 2 groups that put this plan together, being Place and Main and Arnett Muldrow, for the work that they did to capture all of the information that was included in the plan, and also to Jennifer Hackman for coordinating all the steering committee activities that made this finally happen. My concern with this, as happens with so many different reports that we get, is that it just checks a box and it gets put up on the shelf and we're done with it. I feel like we have a fair amount of momentum that's been built up with this particular plan, as well as the associated branding workshop that was done, and I hate to lose that momentum. So in accordance with the goals and priorities that the council has adopted, we do have a goal under economic development to support this tourism plan. And so as a result of that, I would like to propose to the mayor to direct the city administrator to create a work group that would evaluate, prioritize, and finally implement the key pieces of this strategic plan. So I throw it to you, Mr. Mayor.
With that, so you would like to hold off adopting this, or you want to
No,
adopt
I
it
thi-
tonight, but then we want to have a work group?
Yes.
There are people that would like to serve on a work group right now? Becky, I see, and Francis, Megan, and Eileen, okay? And Pat. So should I come up with right now for the names, or you would like to do this later?
I think
From
I
Laura's
would,
standpoint?
Look to Laura for guidance there in terms of the number of council that have asked for representation on this.
Yes, that would be a quorum. We couldn't do that. But, council members, I understood what you were saying. You were asking the mayor to direct the city administrator to
Correct,
create
to put together a work group.
a work
that would
group. So
take
that
this
sounds
forward.
like a staff-led
Right.
activity.
We've heard the interest from at least 4 council members.
Thank you. Can I just get a repeat of the scope one more time? You went pretty quick and a work group
Create
to
a
do
work
what?
group.
A work group that would evaluate, prioritize, and then take those priorities to implementation.
Okay, I heard the implementation and the rest of it was, okay.
Because there are so many items in the implementation plan that we want to make sure that we're capturing those in the right order.
Got it.
Okay. With that, do you want to make a motion to approve this final strategic tourism plan?
Yes, certainly. I move to adopt the final strategic tourism plan as presented.
Second.
Moved and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. We will work on the next thing for getting that group together.
Okay,
No
thank
more
you.
than 3, because we can't have more than a quorum there. Now we go to public hearings tonight. We first have a public hearing to consider a 6-year transit development plan for 22 to 27, and a 21 transit annual report for the city of Pullman from Wayne Thompson, our transit manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Tonight, you've already heard our Public Works annual report. Your transit system is a division of Public Works, but we do have our own unique reporting requirements as a grant recipient, and this public hearing is one of those unique requirements. I'm not going to show you pieces of the report. You should already have that in your packet. I am going to show you some slides on topic, so you have something more interesting to look at than straight ahead here. I'll start off with the review of 2021, and then we'll go on to the 6-year transit development plan. Okay. We provide 35 and 40-foot transit service in the city limits of Pullman, and we also provide paratransit service in the form of dial-a-ride vans for our cities, senior citizens, and those with a qualifying disability. Our funding is a combination of grants, both state and federal, as well as a series of contracts like those we have with WSU, also our fare box and our pass revenue, and a share of the city's utility tax. We're actually quite unique in that regard. Statewide transit systems receive their local non-fare revenue as sales tax. We're the only one who receives local revenue as utility tax. It's worked out quite well for us. Much like the year before, a lot of 2021 was spent responding to COVID-19. This certainly isn't an inclusive list, but some of the highlights. We started 2021 with reduced ridership, reduced revenue, reduced service. But with WSU and the school district planning to go to live classes in the fall, we resumed our driver hiring. Early in 2021, we also completed a project installing plexiglass driver barriers in the buses. These have now become standard issue. We're ordering those with our newest buses as well. We already had a local mask mandate in place, but that was reinforced with a federal version in February. Then by April, we had exhausted our FTA CARES Act funds. In June, a bit of good news, we finally unlocked our doors to the public, first time in over a year. And then in the fall, as we transitioned towards full service, we renewed our WSU contract into October. That timing was fortunate because we learned in the fall that as a service contractor to WSU, we were impacted by the governor's vaccine mandate. So we let our contract expire at the end of October, but we did honor the prepaid ridership terms as we negotiated into 2022. Besides COVID, 2021 had a number of highlights. We received our first 2 fully electric buses. The one on the left is electric, there's a hybrid in the middle, and then a traditional diesel bus at the far right. We had those 2 buses, the 2 electric buses, in service in 2021. We also updated our ADA plan, our Dial-A-Ride handbook. We held a discussion here with council on facility expansion. And we transitioned to hiring only full-time drivers instead of part-time. Initially, that was a COVID recovery measure, but it's become a retention strategy that's ongoing. And we accepted a series of grants in 2021, both for operating grants as well as capital grants. We now have a grant funding our 3rd electric bus, and that arrives next month, and the Dial-A-Ride van replacement. As you heard in the Public Works annual report, our Dial-A-Ride ridership is about 12,000 this year. That's up from 2020, but still not the 20,000 plus that we had become accustomed to since 2015. Fixed route ridership also was increased about 5% over 2020, but 533,000, I believe. We've become accustomed to 1.4 million. That's quite a change. So in response to Councilmember Benjamin's question earlier about as ridership increases, we have a lot of capacity. Okay. Even with the service levels I'll propose in the upcoming public hearing, there's a lot of capacity on these buses still. To close out the 2021 portion of this report, I would add that our capital investments, they included a replacement of our video surveillance system in the facilities and the vehicles. Those first 2 electric buses are placed into service, and by the end of the year, we had received grant funding for a 3rd. As the year 2021 came to an end, we also had the RFP process in place to award a contract for a transit facility master plan. And we continued, as we always do, to look for opportunities for grant assistance for our operating and our capital needs. That's our 1986 facility with shop expansions as well. But that summarizes our 2021. Now I'd like to get into the 6-year forecast, the transit development plan portion. That's really what makes this a unique format from an annual report. We have 6 drivers now, by the way, who are Million Mile Club members, recognized by the National Safety Council, so I'll let you study that while I share some facts and figures. I'd like to emphasize the TDP, the Transit Development Plan, it's a model, it's a forecast. We use it as a framework as we look ahead to what we can accomplish, what milestones we're getting close to, and finances are always a variable and a limitation, but we look for grant assistance, we look for partnership assistance. I'm fairly cautious in our growth. 2% expenses, 2% revenue. Utility tax, I've only plugged in at 1%. We've been doing fairly well with reserves. We tend to set the first 15% aside as covering the upcoming year's operating expenses, just in case we have a revenue delay or failure. And then the next $800,000, if it's there, for capital. And in a really bad situation, that buys you a bus. In a typical situation, that's the matching funds we need for our 20% match with 80% grant funding. That's really what we strive for. It's also enough that it sets enough aside for other large projects, a service expansion, or perhaps a capital facility expansion, like what we expect to develop after the transit facility master plan. We're expecting a facility expansion or even relocation. So operationally, these are some of the highlights from the report of things that you can expect us to focus on over the next 6 years. We'll continue to gather feedback and use that feedback as we develop service, try to meet the need that the public shares with us. We'll continue to consider service adjustments, but we're looking for efficiency, coordination between routes, and also look at identifying what service is necessary. We will continue to be in full compliance with the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. We will look seriously at local and regional connections. That includes the airport and the connection to Moscow. And we'll use the technology resources we have to evaluate our service model. Same sort of a list for our capital needs. We will continue to replace our existing fleet on a vehicle-by-vehicle basis through the CIP process. Often that comes in pairs for the larger bus purchases. We will continue the electric bus concept, really with the benefit of noise and air pollution reduction, but also it could be propane vehicles in the future. It could be hydrogen fuel cell technology. But we'll remain in compliance with the Clean Air Act and the Alternative Fuels Act. We'll look at ways to incorporate smaller vehicles into our fleet. That could be for fixed route service. We could look at a demand response system. People really don't like the idea of a 40-foot bus running around with 5 people in the evening, so there's the possibility of smaller vehicles. The white dial-a-ride vans you see out now are coming out as electrics. They're still not what I would consider reliable or the price I'm wanting to jump at, but that may be an option in the future for more than just dial-a-ride. We will consider relocating our current transfer station over the next 6 years, very likely as part of the facility master plan. That could be a recommendation. We're also hearing as part of discussions with WSU on the long-term use of Stadium Way. There's an interest in Flag Lane right across from Beasley Stadium, Coliseum, that could be a multimodal hub. Some of the scooters and bikes you heard about earlier could be stationed there. There could be college cabs there. We would like to think buses would be there as well. We do remain open to service expansion, but we have to acknowledge any changes in fleet, facility, employee capacity changes, they all have to be sustainable. So I want to close with reinforcing that same comment, especially that with the goals we have, we need to be financially responsible, and any changes we make, they need to be in a sustainable manner. We want to replenish our capital assets on a schedule. We have fallen behind with some of the older diesel buses. We also want to continue to strengthen partnerships. WSU is a critical one. Our labor union is one we can't overlook. Grant funding partnerships. You know, the state is not just the state. We've got different divisions at the Department of Transportation we need to maintain those good relationships with. And finally, safe, reliable, customer-friendly transit service that meets the needs of our community. That's what we should be doing. So my intention is to bring back a final 6-year TDP and annual report on August 9th, but I can include any changes or updates you'd like me to do tonight as well. That's what I have for him.
First of all, comments from the council on anything he made before we go to the public hearing? Okay. This time we open a public hearing on the 6-year plan. Is there anybody who would like to make any comments on the plan that was presented by Wayne tonight? Seeing none, we'll go. Then would you please identify yourself and come up here? And again, you have a limitation of 3 minutes.
Pardon my nerves, I've never done this before. I'm Lucas Powell, and I feel like we could kill quite a few birds with one stone if we just steal Spin's idea and we integrate it into our transit system. Right? It would take cars off the road because people would be on bikes instead. It would put the money in the city's pocket that we need to maintain our streets, potentially. And honestly, it'd be really good. It'd be good for the city. It'd be good for the people there. That's it.
Okay, thank you. With that, we conclude the public hearing. We now move to the next item on the agenda tonight, the public hearing on the Pullman Transit's routes and services that will take effect in August 22.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'll get this presentation loaded. Yeah, thank you for your patience. We do review our routes on a regular basis. Most often, they're very minor changes that you don't hear about. This year, we have a series of adjustments that, if approved, would have the year starting about 85% of what's traditionally considered full service. We are still recovering from the impacts of COVID. We're all getting tired of hearing about that. Specifically, low ridership, hiring difficulties, and reduced revenue is what we're dealing with as we recover. What we've done this year with that significant of a change is we've taken the opportunity to put together a package that we believe represents our level of service recovery, but also puts into place some changes that should be occurring over time anyway. These are not necessarily all COVID-related changes. I'm going to show you all of our routes, some fairly quickly, like this. Loop route, there are no changes. It's one of the more popular routes, a figure 8 through town. Silver route, no changes. It focuses on Pioneer Hill, right here, where City Hall is. Has a connection from the transfer station, up to the Chinook. It's one of the busier stretches of service at a mid-morning time that we rely heavily on, but no changes to this route as well. Paradise route serves Sunnyside Hill, no changes. It's also one of the 4 transfer buses. We do have proposed changes to the blue route, and this is a much-needed change. The focus is where the balloon is on the right screen. And what we do is we avoid the right-hand turn from Spokane Street onto campus, which would take you to the Chinook. You're right there at the stop sign of Spokane and campus. You can see the Chinook up the hill. But right now, there's construction there. Right now, all summer, we've been avoiding this. and we've come to realize this is the solution to, when we leave the Chinook right now, it's a lengthy left-hand turn delay. I've heard as long as 7 minutes, but no matter how long it is, it's enough to put the route tight or behind, and that means it's potentially late. It can delay the transfers waiting at the transfer station across town. It impacts driver breaks. So what we'd like to do is to make that a full-time permanent change. As that bus is going north through campus on Spokane Street, take the left onto campus, stay on it all the way to Ruby, and then you're back on the same route. Just 2 blocks variation, that's the difference. But that left-hand turn is gone. No other bus in the system makes that turn, and we've been looking for ways over the years to get rid of it. The coffee route. This has been a short route for several years that operates only 3 hours a day. We would like to make this a full day, 12-hour route. Really, it would be part of the express system because it connects back up to Beasley Coliseum, Mulberry Track. Instead of that route I just described of the Silver from the transfer station up the hill to the Chinook, it would go around. It would go down Grand or up Stadium Way. And one of the benefits that it would provide, being on an express system, about a 20-minute loop, is that my next slide, I believe, is going to talk about changes to the express system. We would no longer come down the bottom part of Valley Road. So those transit users at that particular stop, Providence Court, they would have access on Brandy Way to the regular expresses or this route on Stadium Way. We would have a stop right across the street, but we would not be traveling lower Valley Road. We've had some issues with airbags on the full-size buses necessary for air brakes, air doors. That particular turn at the bottom of Brandy Way, we've realized that's what's popping our airbags, a sharp turn, the slight change in elevation. So one of a few reasons we'd like to eliminate that turn, but the coffee route is right there, a block away, ready to take those riders straight up to Beasley, to Martin Stadium, Troy Lane if they need to. If they need to get to the heart of campus, the campus route will also be waiting up there. This is the express system. What the traditional express system has been over the years is a crimson and a gray. Sometimes we've had a Cougar or a Cougar. And what they seem to be trying to do is to supplement what the other routes don't do. This system would have 3 buses on the yellow 15-minute loop. We would call it the Apartment Land Express because that's where the riders are coming from. So instead of picking, do you want the crimson, do you want the gray, do you want the Coug, 6 minutes apart, the Apartment Land Express will be covering that yellow loop. And you'd have the coffee waiting for you in Stadium Way. When you get off at Beasley, you can cross the street and there's the campus, takes you to the heart of campus like it has this past year. That's probably the most efficient change that we've recommended, and it's part of a 5-bus express system. We've typically had 6. We've had as many as 7 in a pilot program, but these 3 buses would be the core of a 5-bus express system. I mentioned the campus route. It's operated this way all year. We've called it the campus loop, which is confusing because we have a loop route. So this is the campus route. This, I'll just point out, this particular route, for those that don't like the previous express system over the past year or the one I'm proposing, it's often because it doesn't go far enough into the heart of campus. It's a quick turnaround, 15 minutes per bus. That's 5 to 6 minutes apart. If you need to get into the heart of campus, take this bus, walk across Stadium Way to Mulberry Track, and this bus comes along every 20 minutes. It goes down past the stadium, goes to Troy Lane, travels Spokane. It also goes to the Chinook, which is one loss of the blue route I just explained. This bus always goes to the Chinook. Makes a right-hand turn onto Colorado, not that left that's been so difficult. So we don't struggle with that turn. Both of our evening and weekend routes, the Wheaton and Lentil, we're not proposing changes to the route, but we would like to temporarily end these at 10:15 p.m. instead of midnight. It's one of the cutbacks that gets us to that 85%, which we believe is the match of our revenue right now. So both of these routes, the Wheat and the Lentil, would run their 45-minute loops every weekday evening during full service and Saturdays. But instead of going until midnight, they would end at 10:15 p.m. My hope would be that revenue changes, that we increase revenue in this particular case from WSU, and we can extend evening service, maybe consider adding another express route. Anticipating you might have some questions about ridership, dropping 2 hours from an evening route, what's the impact? I pulled together some pre-COVID and some recent year ridership data on these two routes, just these two. On the Lentil route, pre-COVID, on a weekday evening, we had 3 to 4 people per night. On a Saturday, we had 15. Last year, which is coming out of COVID, less than 1 rider per night weekdays and barely 2 on a Saturday night. The Wheat is a little better, not much. It averaged pre-COVID 6 per weekday night and 21 on a Saturday. Last year, it was less than 1 per evening and 4 on a Saturday night. So those are post 10 p.m. ridership figures I just gave you. So yes, we have some ridership, not a large amount, and we would like to get back to midnight service eventually, but we believe this is one area that needs to temporarily be cut back. So like the TDP, I would like to get your input, bring it back to you on the 9th as a final package. So I'm looking for any input you can provide at this point.
Okay, Nathan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Wayne, I appreciate you really adjusting and adapting, especially during the challenging times that we've had. I do have a few questions and one suggestion. So as you know, I'll go with the suggestion first. So our focus on the downtown is really paramount. I would suggest the coffee route, since it does go through downtown, call it the downtown route. That would be my suggestion.
Yeah, that's actually been suggested, so not a bad idea.
I have one every once in a while. The other is a question. I appreciate you continuing the route that goes by CAC. That's extremely important. I did also have a question regarding, so the Riverview apartments are kind of out there on Bypass Drive, past Clearwater Avenue, off of Fairmont. And I know it's a bit out there, but a lot of those individuals, and especially now we're having a child care center go in the coming year or 2 years, there is no access to transportation beside about, I think they would have to walk almost half a mile to the bus stop, and some of the people in the Riverview have limited mobility.
Good.
So I know that's not in your plans. I know right now you're facing, everybody is facing challenges, and but I would like to see sometime in the future if there's a vision to do that. As you know, I'm really focused on the mobility issues and the people who need it. So
I'm looking at our current routes and trying to confirm which direction we're going. You're talking about behind the hospital, I believe, right?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, behind the hospital, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a tough one because there's only one road there.
Yeah.
Wouldn't those with mobility issues, couldn't they just call for dial-a-ride in that area?
Yeah, if there are mobility issues, they
Yeah.
ought to qualify for dollar
Because
rate.
that's part of our service.
Yeah.
I know with the transportation of the people, there's a good chunk. You're on the board for CAC. There's a lot of people there who have limited transportation, limited mobility, so.
And we've plowed the street there and plowed the sidewalk so they could get to the bus stop. But the nearest bus stop is right up there by the,
It's behind Walmart.
This is the
It's
route on
behind
the
Walmart.
screen. This is the silver route. It's going uphill, so they would cross the street to catch a bus. We could add a stop across from the entrance. I believe Clearwater Drive is about where you're talking about.
Yeah,
Yes.
Clearwater Drive. It's
Yeah.
still about 2,000 feet or so from the location, as the crow flies. But,
Right.
I mean, anything to better help that.
The loop route, they'd have to walk down to the hospital on Grand or Walmart on Grand, or Beasley, I'm sorry, or Bishop Boulevard. Okay, so I will look at that. I don't see it happening this year.
I
With
understand.
Dollar as an option.
Just planting a seed.
Sure.
All right.
and with construction going on there for one of the credit unions, maybe there might be a room for a bus turnout right in that area, as they
Right,
go
that would
through
be
and
an
plan or
opportunity.
whatever. So, other comments? Francis?
Thank you. I think the Lennell route also goes through that area too. So
Right.
could we
Make sure it's
possibly-
going the same direction.
So the only comment I had was on the blue route, and the route's fine for me. I'm thinking the arrows and the signage. In the current one, the arrows indicate that you're going up Terraview, but on the proposed one, you don't have the Terraview up the turnaround and back, and so it'd be nice just for
Sure.
when people look at the route to see that there is a bus that goes up and a bus that goes back
It will,
along there.
it will. That is a future change I would like to make. I would like to take that little leg off of the blue route and get them serviced down by the fire hall. But there's currently no way to get people safely from Palouse Trace Apartments to that location. But you are correct, that is still served. I'll make sure the aerials get back in.
Great, thank you.
Ann?
Thank you. Wayne, thank you so much. I was just telling a friend of mine today about, I said, oh, we're going to look at bus routes. And they were like, ooh. I said, no, actually, it's really good because I really appreciate the thought that you put into these and the way you integrate all the ridership data. And it's just it's very easily presented as well for us. Regarding the wheat and the lentil route, I know this can't happen right now, but would smaller buses that you mentioned earlier make sense for this route, maybe even starting at the smaller buses after like 7 p.m. or something like that, or 9?
They would.
Eventually.
The route could stay the same, but if we had smaller buses,
Yeah.
and that's one thing I left out, I thought about mentioning, when we look at smaller buses and try to maintain the electric theme, we've got all Gillig buses right now, and Gillig's smallest bus is a 35, which is what we're already getting. So we don't really have a smaller electric option. If we're going to reduce the size of some of these buses, we could change vendors. We could go with a really small dollar ride van and try to use it late nights. If ridership is 5 or so per loop, that would work.
Yeah.
So that's an option.
Thank you.
Yes, we could run those same routes with smaller vehicles. Right now, it's a drop from a 35-foot transit bus to a 10-passenger van is all we have.
I had one question regarding, well, actually it's two, because a couple of times you've mentioned the person would have to cross Stadium Way to catch the bus. And I think, is that a new addition, or is that what they're doing right now? Because we've had a number of pedestrian accidents crossing Stadium Way. And even though it gets closer to the campus, they've got some better lighting and better warning devices.
Right. The one
I almost got hit by Beasley crossing the street there one time because somebody was turning left and they weren't looking for somebody, even though I had a green walk. So I'm really concerned to make sure we don't increase pedestrian accidents because we're now taking them to
Sure.
cross the street.
The spot I've been specifically referring to is Mulberry Track from North Fairway. And there's a crosswalk there. There's a live camera that the WSU Transportation Services Office keeps an eye on, and they're pleased with the setup. I think Flag Lane would solve it.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have buses pulling into North Fairway. They would be pulling on the inside of Stadium Way, Flag Lane.
Yeah, that would be
Really
good.
hoping that happens in a year or two, but that's the only spot that, over the past couple of years, has been a change to having to cross Stadium Way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other comments? Then at this time, we open up a public hearing for any comments on this proposal. The open hearing. Is there anyone who'd like to make any comments? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. And is there any other item that you would like to have on this, Wayne, or we've got enough information to move on?
No, this is very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. That we now go to the regular agenda. Tonight, we have a motion to authorize the mayor to execute an agreement to partner with Blue Bridge Alliance to participate in a pilot program to provide aid to those in need. We go to Gary Jenkins with that report.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening again, Council.
And we need to have, there he is, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. The police department's relationship with the community is a critical factor in maintaining a safe community. We're also in a position to identify those in need, as evidenced by our work with the Poverty Awareness Task Force in providing emergency housing vouchers. Blue Bridge Alliance was created to provide a means for law enforcement to enhance their relationships with their communities while helping those in need. Officers will be issued debit cards to access funds to assist those with an emergency or urgent need. Examples of assistance can include groceries, gasoline, and clothing. This is a pilot program that includes 8 law enforcement agencies in Washington State. Pullman Police Department was selected as one of the 8. Initial funding is provided by Blue Bridge with a grant they received from the Department of Commerce. Continued funding will be by way of community donations. All funds pass through Blue Bridge Alliance, a 501c3 organization. All donations and expenditures require full documentation and accounting with Blue Bridge. Staff recommends council authorize the mayor to execute an agreement to partner with Blue Bridge Alliance in this pilot program.
Comments or questions on this? Eileen?
I see this is described as a pilot program, but I didn't see a sunset or evaluation period, any sort of a timeline. Is that, did I miss it?
Honestly, I believe the grant that they received is I want to say 1 year or 18 months. The thought is that they want to expand it statewide. So honestly, I'm not sure how long the grant period is, but I know that Blue Bridge will have to provide a report back to the Department of Commerce on the grant funds.
But we don't have any metrics or any way that the program would be evaluated, or, because I mean, we need that for our feedback too, because if it's working on our end, we want to emphasize the things that are good, and then maybe turn the dials down on things that aren't working, so we make sure that we're using those grant monies most effectively.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to be reporting everything to them, and also have their guidance on expenditures. And really, it's such a new program they're still trying to feel all that out, and so we'll be part of that process to determine the best protocols for this program.
Okay.
Nathan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, you're not supposed to be continuing to look to the future. You're supposed to be retiring and enjoying your time. I wholeheartedly support this. This is awesome. So thank you for continuing to look out for us. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
No other comments? Do I hear a motion on this?
Move to adopt.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, we next, a discussion item for transit state and federal grant application discussion with Wayne Thompson again.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I don't have any graphics for you. You should have a memo already in your packet. And I don't mind saying, I think I've saved the best for last tonight on my topics. I always talk about looking for grant opportunities. Well, here's 5 that I want to present to you that I'd like to go after this fall. It's a combination of state and federal. And federal, it's usually FTA. This is a particularly good cycle to be looking for federal funding because of the bipartisan infrastructure law. At the state level, they're already telling us to expect about 25% more funding from the federal grants than typical. So a lot more money out there for the federal grants. And for us, our operating grant is almost entirely federal. Our capital grants tend to be federal. Facility expansion, federal. So the first two on the list are just our typical operating grants for fixed routes and dial-a-ride. And those can be 4-year grants. That's a new change, a cycle back. So I would apply for those this year, project out 2 years, and then we would do usually as much as 10% as an escalating factor to keep it within range for 2 more years. The third one, though, has been a long time coming. I would like to extend service to the airport. It's a separate type of grant. We would call it expansion money. We can get far more than the 25% that we typically would with ongoing operating funds. So for 2 years, I calculate the request of $585,000 to run a bus all day long to the airport. I've had a bus out there, met with Tony Bean. The new terminal is being designed with bus pullouts, not just ours, but Northwest Trailways, I expect, Wheatland Express. But we feel prepared for this. Might be delayed a bit as the terminal's built, as road construction in the area is completed, but now is the time to apply for the money. The fourth bullet is 2 more electric buses. At the rate that we struggle with our diesel buses, it would be nice to get 3, 4, even 5, but these are not cheap. The prices have gone up by 50% recently, very, very recently. No great explanation. Supply and demand, the typical things we heard during COVID, but they are going up. But the cost that I've put in would cover the cost of the chargers, the cost of the wrap, fare box, video system, try to get everything into this price, and that would cover 80%. And the reserves I talked about earlier would be in place to cover our 20%. The last grant topic is a product of the recent state legislature's Move Ahead Washington package, and they call it Transit Support Grants, a rather generic title, but what it accomplishes is for those agencies that adopt the policy, it's fare-free rides for everyone 18 and under. The program's been somewhat misleading because right away when it passed, the word went out, everyone 18 and under rides free. Well, we don't have to accept this grant. I think we would be foolish not to, because the money gained just to complete 2022 into July of 2023, we would get $160,000 as our part of the grant. And what that does is guarantee 18 and under ride free. After that, it's over $400,000 a year we would get as part of that grant system. A little bit of setup and maintenance as far as how do you enforce something like this. You can't just put it on the driver to say you look like you're 18, not 19. We would ask people to go to the WSU Visitor Center or City Hall where you would normally buy your passes, and we would give them a pass when they show ID. We could also allow public school students to use their student ID. We could say if you're obviously 12 or under, we're not going to question you, but for everyone else, you need this pass. Various systems are being implemented throughout the state. Those that already had fare-free systems are in good shape. Those that had, say, the ORCA system on the west side, they just changed the parameters of what the card is for, how do you get it. So we would have that behind the scenes work. We have to have this in place by October 1st to get the current year's funding. And what I would do in this particular case, rather than a grant application, is come back to you with a draft policy that we would try to get in place before October 1st. It could be more encompassing than just 18 and under. It could be a full system fare policy, which right now we don't have. Might be a good opportunity to do that as well. So what I'm looking for is direction, conversation, discussion on any or all of these. I'd like to go forward with all 5, really, but welcome input on any of these.
And Becky, since I didn't call on you the last time when you wanted to say something, I'm going to start with you. And
Well, I
we'll just
did-
start that way.
Okay, I didn't have my hand raised, but they all, if you have the time and capacity to go for all 5, they look great to me. Thank you so much for finding those.
Thank you.
Ann?
So right now, and it's been a while since my kids have been in school, but they used to, through about Lincoln Middle School or so, they used to be able to ride fare-free with their school ID. And I believe that was I'm not talking about the trippers, just they could get on any city bus, but it was only during the school year. Will this be year-round for 18 and younger?
This will be year-round.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any transit service we offer, even dial-a-ride, 18 and under are free.
Yeah. I'm seeing a lot of head nods, just go for it.
Okay.
All of them. Get as much money as you
Yep.
can.
All right?
Yeah,
Take the
that's
money
right.
and run the
And
transit
get the thing done
system.
by October to get
Yeah.
get the money in.
Good. Thank you.
Thanks, Wayne.
And thank you for going after those grants.
Good.
Okay.
I'll keep you posted.
Is there any new business to come before the council tonight? Seeing none, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Moves and second, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?